Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
How is everyone today?
Good.
Excellent. My name is William McWhorter, and I'm the Military Sites and the Oral History Programs Coordinator at the Texas Historical Commission in Austin. And joining me here today is my new colleague, there she is, Maddie Kleitz, with our County Historical Commission Outreach Program. It's a pleasure to be here in Karnes County, and especially here in Kenedy for today's marker dedication. Before the ceremony starts, would you please stand and join me with the pledge to the United States flag, followed by the pledge to the Texas state flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the pledge to the Texas state flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one nation, under God, indivisible. Excellent. If you have a seat, you may take it now, and we will begin with today's ceremony. Thank you again for being here today. Before I introduce today's first speaker, I'd like to make a few acknowledgments. Joining us today, and if I can, there he is Karnes County Judge, Mr. Butler. Judge Butler, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you being in attendance. Also joining us today, behind you, are two officials from the city of Kenedy. We have Mayor Buddy Garza, and we have City Manager Patton with us today as well. Are there any other officials from the city with us today? No? Oh, one over here? Excellent. Well, thank you as well for joining the Mayor and City Manager Patton for being here for today's dedication. Now, I see a lot of faces out there. Some of them I know, some I don't. So if I miss you in the acknowledgments, I do apologize. And of course, I'll be introducing other people here today as they come up in the ceremony program as speakers. But with us from nearby Lavaca County is Doug Kubicek, the County Historical Commission Chair in the front row here. Joining him is Roger Wade, the Vice Chairman in the red shirt. And if you love Texas and World War I history, which Camp Kenedy certainly has a connection to, make sure you go to their conference on Saturday, October 18th, the Alton C. Allen Conference, where it's going to be the subject of Texas and World War I. Also joining me today is a former speaker at one of our marker dedications. A little west of here in a county called Zavala, a place called Crystal City, where the largest of its kind in the state and in the nation was the internment camp Crystal City Family Internment Camp. Is Mrs. Brinsfield Schofield with us, an accomplished historian who continues to do papers all over the country talking about this subject. Now, we have someone to acknowledge today who can't be with us. I'm sure you're going to know his name and, of course, his book in a second when I hold it up. But the Texas Historical Commission's research into Camp Kenedy, the development of this brochure, which each of you will get a chance to have in a second, in part, this historical marker and the web pages at our website associated with Camp Kenedy would not have been possible without the prior research and, of course, the generous contributions of information from former Karnes County Judge Robert Thonhoff. And I just want to say, if you have not had a chance to meet the individual or read his book about Camp Kenedy from World War I through its time as an internment camp onto a prisoner of war camp before the end of World War II, it's a fantastic read, and he's an outstanding historian along with his wife. The Texas Historical Commission's preservation efforts are built on a network of 254 county historical commissions. We're a very lucky state in that aspect. Not so much for the number of them, but for the enthusiasm that county historical commission members bring towards their local history and how it fits into the greater state context. And we could not be as successful as we are as preservationists across the state, whether at our agency or as private individuals, without the help of these county historical commissions. So that said, I would like to thank Chair Truett Hunt to my left here and the members of the commission that are here today. Would you please raise your hands? Excellent. For being fantastic members and partners in preservation. Joining me in recognizing the great work of the County Historical Commission here in Karnes County is Texas State Representative for District 17, Tim Kleinschmidt. Although the representative could not be here today, he did have a flag flown over the state capitol in honor of the work of the Karnes County Historical Commission, along with a letter of recognition. And Truett, if you wouldn't mind, would you please come up for a second? I know you're going to speak later, but I would like to present you with that flag and certificate on behalf of the Karnes County Historical Commission from the representative.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karnes County Historical Commission. That said, why don't we move forward for our first speaker? I'm going to introduce the very special speaker that we have today, Texas State Senator for District 21, Judith Zaffirini, in the front row right here. Senator Zaffirini, as you may know, is the second highest ranking Texas State Senator, and she's also the highest ranking female senator in the state legislature. She's carried all 17 counties in a large and diverse district every re-election, something no one else has accomplished. And Senator Zaffirini is the chair of the Government Organization Committee and serves as chair of the Higher Education Committee between 2006 and 2012. She's a member of the Legislative Budget Board and on the Senate Finance and Economic Development Committee. Her legislative priorities include improving public education, higher education, and health and human services. A member of the Energy Council since 2009, she is particularly active in addressing opportunities and challenges associated with the Eagle Ford Shale. She is the recipient of more than 670 awards and honors for her legislative, public service, and professional work, and it's an honor to have her here today. Please welcome State Senator Judith Zaffirini.
Thank you so much for such a warm and generous introduction. I'm delighted to be with you again today in Kenedy, especially for this very special unveiling of an historical marker. All of us who appreciate history understand its importance in sharing it not only with our community, but also with people outside our community, outside our state, and especially with our children, so that our children can understand those beautiful words by Maya Angelou, who wrote so long ago, that history, despite its wrenching agony, cannot be unlived. Think about it. Cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. And that is an acknowledgement that we have so much to be proud of when we look at our history, but we also have some points along the line that cause us great concern. When you read works like those written by George Takei, for example, when he talks about being a Peruvian of Japanese descent and being picked up one day and taken away from his family and brought here to Camp Kenedy while his family was taken to Crystal City. He was incarcerated for 2 years, and he writes that he was incarcerated with no charges, with no trial, with no due process. And he said, we were guilty only of looking like the people who bombed Pearl Harbor. That's not anything to be proud of, but it is reality. It is what happened. And we realize that Camp Kenedy started out in World War I as a training camp and as a civilian conservation corps camp. But then it became this enemy alien detention center. The good thing about it is that history indicates that everyone who stayed here was treated with humanitarian purposes and with respect, and that they were comfortable. There was no torture, there was no animosity, and in fact, they realized, much to their chagrin, but they understood why these detainment camps were developed. And the fact of the matter was that the United States government reacted with great shock to the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And its reaction included creating these camps and protecting our citizens from internal sabotage. That was their purpose. But when they picked up those who came to the detention camps, they not only treated them with respect, they protected them from curiosity seekers and from those who wished them harm. So basically, it was a shock reaction that we were dealing with. And you will hear from those who have more expertise than I do about the history of the camps and about the purposes of the camps. And it's important that we unveil this marker to bring attention to Camp Kenedy, because I can't tell you how many Texans have no idea that this happened. When we think of World War II, we think justifiably, with great pride, of our veterans, the greatest generation. And it stirs within our hearts grand feelings of patriotism. But there are other sides to the story, and we cannot close our eyes. In Laredo, my hometown, we love to say, hablando se entiende la gente. Through communication, we understand each other. And that communication needs to reflect a deep understanding of our past, a deep understanding of our history, and what we can build upon from what was good and what we can learn from anything that was negative. So as we teach others that there were 5 such paths in Texas, and as we talk about those in Crystal City and the facilities at Crystal City, which will be described by others, we need to understand that we don't want to do this again, that we don't want to pick people up with no charges, with no trials, with no due process. But we always want to learn from our past and to prepare for a better future. Emphasizing history is so important in our state, and that is why I'm so proud to support and to recognize the Texas Historical Commission. They have been phenomenal, and we have done such good work in our courthouse preservation program. $255 million, $45 million for this biennium alone. And I'm delighted that we secured for Karnes County $1 million for our courthouse renovation. And that is only part of the process. The courthouse preservation program is so important to our communities and to our great state because it is there that we capture the history of our different counties. The state of Texas has 60,000 markers, 60,000. And how many do you have in Karnes County? I believe 60 in Karnes County alone. That is tremendous. That is a real accomplishment. And what it reflects is the work of your local leaders, your Karnes County Historical Commission and Society. The local leaders who understand their own history better than anyone else and will do their part to ensure that the lessons we have learned through our experience and the experience of generations before us will always be remembered, and that we will always remember the negative and the positive, but always with great hope for a better future, with hope that through education our children can enjoy an even better future. My prayer for all of you is that the Lord will inspire you to continue to excel in every way, every day, but especially in preserving your history and teaching it to those who will follow. Thank you for allowing me to be with you today. Thank you so much.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Well, in just a moment, I'm going to introduce a speaker, a great historian in his own right, Dr. Kenedy. He's going to talk to us a little bit more about Camp Kennedy's history. But before he does, I'm going to talk a little bit about the project history associated with this historical marker and the 4 other ones across Texas associated with enemy alien internment during World War II of Japanese, Germans, and Italians. Before I do that, why don't we all do a real quick check down at our feet? Any red ants? They sneak up on you, you know they do. On September 2nd, 2005, the Texas Historical Commission led a commemoration at the state capitol to kick off a new initiative called Texas in World War II. This was the 60th anniversary of the end of World War II. A very special program indeed. It had a proclamation from the governor, flyover of vintage aircraft, 2 military bands up from Fort Sam Houston, and hundreds of folks out on the lawn commemorating Texas' service during the war. When the initiative started that year, it had 4 main projects. First is called Here and There. It's a series of oral history training workshops across the state. And thankfully, we've been able to do 63 of those since 2006. Second was called Vignette Wartime Texas. And that was a special series of 21 historical markers to undertold topics, such as the American GI Forum in Corpus Christi, Women Army Service Pilots, and a place called Crystal City Family Internment Camp, which led to these other 4 markers that we're commemorating over the next year here in Texas. And last but not least, the other 2 main components are tied together. It's a statewide survey of all the military and home front sites in the state, put into a database through brand new web pages on our website, so folks can go to there, pull down a county, pull down an Army airfield by name, pull down a branch of service, and find out what resources are here in the state of Texas at different archives, at different county historical commissions, local county museums, and of course dissertations and books, so we can learn more about our shared history. In scope, content, culture, and geography, the Texas and World War II initiative strives to commemorate the diversity of the Texas World War II experience. And one way we've done this is through the assistance of the National Park Service's Japanese American Confinement Sites Grant Program. This is a special grant program enacted in 2007 to provide funding to talk more about War Relocation Authority camps across the United States, sites where Japanese and Japanese Americans were interned during World War II. Well, the Park Service found out about what we were doing out in Crystal City with our historical marker back in 2007 and asked us, the state that is, if we would like to partner with the City of Crystal City and the Zavala County Historical Commission to do a grant project to talk about Crystal City. And we said, of course we would, but as you do know, there were Germans and Italians held there as well. And it's far more complex than that. And to their credit, the National Park Service, through their Japanese American Climate Sites Grant Program, said, yes, please apply. They presented us with a grant that year, and thankfully we received 2 more since then to do projects across the state. And this marker is part of the second grant. Now, while most people are aware of the War Relocation Authority and the approximately 120,000 Issei, that's first-generation Japanese, and Nisei, second-generation Japanese, mainly from the U.S. West Coast, that were incarcerated in the system, few are aware of another internment camp system that took place in the United States during World War II. Through separate confinement programs, thousands of Japanese, German, and Italian citizens in the U.S., and in many cases their U.S. citizen relatives, classified as enemy aliens, were detained by the Department of Justice through its Alien Enemy Control Unit and brought up from Latin America by the Department of State's Special War Problems Division. Through President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's executive orders, he signed information, got a spider on the podium and just took my attention away there. Let's try that again. Through President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's administration, executive orders were signed that called for the arrest and the internment of enemy aliens who were Japanese, German, and Italian citizens to secure the Western Hemisphere, quote, from internal sabotage and to provide peoples for exchange of American citizens captured by Japan and Germany, quote. Texas had 3 of these DOJ facilities administered by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, here in Kenedy, 1 in Seagoville, and the 1 in Crystal City. While temporary detention stations were set up by the U.S. Army in locations where the INS did not have enough resources to have temporary detention sites. And in Texas, we had that at Fort Sam Houston, it was called Dodd Field, and at Fort Bliss. By January 1942, all enemy aliens in the U.S., not already arrested by the FBI, and in custody after the December 7th, 1941 Empire of Japan attack on the U.S. at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, were required to register at local post offices, where they were fingerprinted, photographed, and followed compulsory instructions to carry photo-bearing registration cards. By early 1942, the DOJ began hearing individual cases on enemy aliens through their Alien Enemy Control Units hearing boards located in each federal judicial district. Reviewed individually, each enemy alien's case was sent back up to Washington, where it was decided if the enemy alien would be released, paroled, or interned for the duration of the war. Simultaneously, citizens of Japanese, German, and Italian ancestry residing in 2 Caribbean nations and 13 Latin American countries, with the majority from Peru, were deported by those nations to the U.S. via the Department of State's Special War Problems Division for internment and eventual repatriation to Japan, Germany, and Italy. Now, how do you repatriate someone to Japan, Germany, or Italy if they were born in South America? Economic hardships brought on by the internment of enemy alien heads of households residing in the U.S. often resulted in voluntary internment of enemy alien family members, sometimes including U.S.-born citizens, such as wives and children, into the internment camps like Crystal City. Today, we have gathered to dedicate a special historical marker, show this brochure, and talk about the history of the Kenedy Alien Detention Station during World War II. Under different names, organizations, and even 2 world wars, Camp Kenedy has had a long and storied life here in Kenedy. During World War I, it was the site of an Army training post. During the Great Depression, it's a civilian conservation corps. To start World War II, it's housing enemy aliens. And then before the war's over, it's going to be a German prisoner of war camp, followed by a Japanese prisoner of war camp. Meanwhile, through the remainder of 1942 and the beginning of 43, a portion of Camp Kennedy's detainees were repatriated to their ancestral countries, at war with the U.S. at the time, while others were united in Crystal City, and Seagoville in Dallas County. The INS ceased its operation at Camp Kennedy in September of 1944. And after the internment camp closed, as Dr. Krennick will talk about shortly, it became an enemy prisoner of war camp. As previously indicated, the U.S. implemented programs to identify and, if necessary, detain civilians considered a threat to the country from Japan, Germany, and Italy. In all three programs, citizens of their respective countries, legal resident aliens, and naturalized citizens were targeted by those governments in Latin America and the United States alongside individuals identified as enemy aliens. Today's marker in this brochure allow Texans to learn more about a history that is undertold, remembering our shared past and preserving it for future generations. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite up to the podium Dr. Tom Krennick to speak more about the history of Camp Kennedy.
Thank you. I'm like Lou Gehrig today. I'm the luckiest guy in the world because everything I was going to say has already been said by the senator and by William before. Now, what am I going to do? I'm going to stand up here and tap dance around a little bit, but when you're born and raised in Karnes County, Texas, you can tap dance real well, all right? Stories are, well, there's another word for that. I won't use it. There's too many feminine ears in the audience. But being able to sling a little, I guess, is one of the things you're born with when you come from this part of the world. Like I say, I guess I would add to what both the senator eloquently stated, much more eloquently than I could ever put it, and what William effectively said as well, probably better than I could ever say it. And that is, civil liberties is always the first casualty of war. And it really is. And that it doesn't matter whether it's here in the United States or whether it's in Germany or Japan or wherever. Whatever liberties those countries had at the time went out the window as well. And we see that even around us today, unfortunately, in some of the legislation come down. And I don't mean to get political because I stay away from politics as much as possible. But that tends to be the case. People are rightly afraid. Anybody who has lived through 9/11 is going to be rightly afraid of what might come later. And so you tend to sig the FBI on them. And quite frankly, I'm kind of glad the FBI is watching folks, all right? And I'll stack my progressive tendencies against anybody. But I had friends, as many of you probably did, who were working on Wall Street when those towers came down. I had to watch a friend literally on cell phone running from her Wall Street office all 84 blocks up Manhattan Island to get away from the debris and the death and the carnage and whatever put upon us that day. So we can look back at the past and not necessarily condemn, because I did not hear a condemnation. I heard explanation. But we can see it around us today, and we do have to be careful about that. And that's all I'll say about that. I want to say that it's before I begin any of my prepared remarks, that state senators are hard acts to follow. I mean, I think you speak publicly for a living, don't you, Senator? You've been doing that for a few. And I didn't know you were from Laredo. And I've never known anybody from Laredo, and I have many friends in Laredo who weren't eloquent speakers. They were all, I guess you know the Brunis and the Landeckers and the Navas and all that bunch. Well, they're wonderful people, and I'm glad to know that you're from Laredo. Again, I apologize for not knowing that. So these were hard acts to follow. And I got scared before I came up here. My remarks are going to be about 5 minutes, which means I'm going to turn them into about 20 minutes. No, 5 minutes. It's getting too hot. I can see people. I got startled a while ago when William was speaking because I saw a Kenedy animal control truck go by there, and I thought they were looking for stray dogs like me. And so, at any rate, luckily he went on past. Where's Judge Butler? Judge Butler, I've been meaning to talk to you. My Eagleford lease expired, and I'm asking you to find me another one. Okay? Do you have anything to do with that? Sure. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes, you know. At any rate, I want to thank Truett. Having said that, I want to thank Truett and Maggie Hunt for inviting me, and the other members of the Historical Commission for inviting me to come say a few words. I'm afraid I got it by default simply because I'm from the Kenedy area. I'm from Karnes County originally, born here in 1948. In fact, I was telling, where's Jeannie with the light brown hair? Jeannie, there you are. How could I miss you? I was explaining that house right there, I spent many an evening or many a night in that house because it belonged to the Franklin family, Reuben and Gracie Franklin. And so this very location means a great deal to me. We were all, Pruitt, Lee and I, we all graduated from high school together. Or they kicked us out of high school together. I can't remember what it was. They made us leave, all right? They'd had enough of us. You know, it's not quite hot enough yet, but, you know, I grew up here thinking, I didn't remember how hot it was, but I've been gone for so long, and I moved back here 2 years ago, and I can't believe we lived in this kind of heat. I guess we either didn't know any better, or my 66 years are beginning to play on my constitution. But at any rate, as the senator and as William pointed out, this marker commemorates a very significant part of Kenedy and Karnes County history because it recalls its World War II alien detention camp. It was one of those things, very important things, in a very real and meaningful way, brought the United States wartime participation to the home front. Okay, in a very real way, very real manner. Of course, many people from Kenedy, Karnes City, and South Texas volunteered or went to the service or were involved in the war effort in many ways. But this camp brought it home like few other experiences did. As the marker will indicate, and as has been indicated by the two previous speakers, the Kenedy detention camp was open to house men. Wasn't for women, wasn't for families, but to house men who were termed, quote, enemy aliens, unquote, and they were rounded up in Central and South America. Now, these folks that ended up here in Kenedy were mainly German, Japanese, and Italian alien residents, or they were citizens of their host country, all right? And they were identified by their host country and described. And if you'll read in Robert Tonhoff's book, I love some of the descriptions. One poor character came by the name of Huck, came up here because he had just come from Germany and he looked suspicious. All right, that was it. The guy looked suspicious. I wonder how many times a policeman, either in Houston or Corpus Christi, wanted to arrest me because I looked suspicious. All right, maybe sometimes they do arrest you for looking suspicious. But at any rate, they were citizens or alien residents of their host country. Now, these individuals were viewed by our own State Department, and for that matter, by the Latin American countries who participated with us in that war. They were identified as people who might pose a threat to the American war effort. In the descriptions, a lot of them were seen as very pro-Nazi, and they had connections, at least according to to the data. And these people, quite frankly, were seen as individuals who could be exchanged with those enemy nations for Americans that were being held in captivity by our opposing countries. So they had they were bargaining chips. They were trade chips, or at least they were seen that way in the beginning. Now this Camp Kenedy operated for 30 months, from 1942 to 1944. Around, like I say, around 30 months. And at one time, at any one time, it housed between 600 to 700 to 800, more or less, detainees. All right. Over its entire period, over 3,500 detainees called Camp Kenedy, or the Alien Detention Camp Kenedy, called it home. So there were about 3,500 people that spent time here, but never more than, I think the highest number was around 800. Was around 800 people. Now, ultimately, all these people by 1944 or in 1944 were either transferred to other camps, they were paroled, or they were repatriated. Sometimes repatriated to Germany when they weren't Germans. I don't know if that was the case with anybody here in Kenedy, but certainly, I mean, tragically, there were Jewish people who had been picked up in other camps who ended up in Germany. You can imagine they hadn't ever been there, or they'd fled. But at any rate, a lot of these people were repatriated back to their home country. Now, 5 of these detainees, you might say, are still with us. I'm sure many of you have seen this place, but they died while they were here. 1 Japanese guy and 4 German fellows. And they're buried in a little plot out on County Road 330, right off the ridge going, I guess, kind of east, down the road from the Kenedy Cemetery off the Loma Cemetery complex. They're there. It's a burial ground that has been designated a historic Texas cemetery. That was done in 2005. Again, I believe with the, I believe Bob Tonhoff was one of the people really behind that. But it's a historic Texas cemetery. Now, like most prisons, and it was, I use the term detainees, but they were prisoners. Anytime you can't leave on your own, you're a prisoner. Sort of like being married, huh? No, I didn't mean that. Had to throw in a little foul humor. Like most prisons, the camp was also brought on local jobs and provided a bit of labor. To be very candid with you, and it's recorded very well in Bob's book, it was sort of an economic hustle by the Chamber of Commerce, at least so Bob has pointed out. The CCC camp had folded. Most of those boys had gone into the service, and the economy kind of dipped. And, we were coming out of the Depression, and so we needed something else. And so the Chamber of Commerce and other businessmen really put on the hard sell and got this here as sort of an economic form of economic development. Of course, guided by patriotism, always guided by patriotism. I'm being a little hard there, but it was seen as a form of economic development. On a personal note, let me say this. Many of the people here in the audience have a very personal connection to this historical marker and what it commemorates. And I say commemorates. Because on a personal note here, I grew up hearing stories about the detainees. My dad was a farmer here in the area during World War II. He was one of the famous 4Fers, okay, because he was a farmer. And he hired some of the German detainees to pull his corn crop. All right, you had to go out and fill out the forms. They got paid. They went out there. And my dad always said, hell, they ate better than we did. They really did. They ate better than we did, quoting him. And my dad grew up speaking German. That was his family was a German-speaking household. And he could speak with these guys. And he remembers that their constant question to him was, what am I doing here? All right, a lot of them. Now I don't know how many were just conning my dad, but he seemed to think that was his overriding memory, is that they didn't know what they were doing here, but they would go out there. And my dad was half German, so I don't mean to insult anybody here who's German, but my dad's one comment was, my dad again being half German, he said, being German, you know, they ate well. Yeah, I don't know if that's some kind of overgeneralization or stereotype, but at any rate, he used to eat with them. And I might add that one of the guards, again, how personal this is to so many of us, one of the guards, where's Truett Lee? Mr. Hunt. Mr. Hunt's dad, Mr. Marshall Hunt, the late Mr. Marshall Hunt, who was a great guy, lived out in the Choate area. Truett Lee's grandfather was one of the guards. I tend to think he was on horseback out there. So, you know, there were a couple of guards with him. They weren't really dangerous fellows, all right? They were out there pulling corn and working and asking why in the world what had happened to them had happened to them. I guess a lot of people in prison ask themselves, you know, what has happened to me? But at any rate, at the time, workers were hard to get. The people who had traditionally harvested the crops had gone to the war industries in Houston and were working in the shipyards. But at any rate, you know, when you grow up hearing these stories, markers like that hold great meaning to people of my generation. At any rate, there is much, much more to the story of this camp, especially as it evolved from being a CCC camp, and in 1944 it morphed into a prisoner, as William said, it morphed into a prisoner of war camp. And if you want to learn all about it, the mother lode, the real source, is this book here, and that is Camp Kenedy, Texas, written by our own judge, former judge Robert Tonhoff, published in 2003. It provides all the details, and rather than asking me about it, because everything I know about it except my stories, I really got from Bob. And we should really give thanks to Bob. I wish he was here, but we really ought to be thankful to Bob for recording this episode in Texas and Karnes County history for future generations. He's done it better than anybody. This is the definitive work. And let me conclude by saying that the unveiling of this marker is also a way of paying tribute to Judge Tonhoff, who is really a truly great person. I think everybody who knows him will say that. Again, unfortunately, he couldn't be with us today. But I wish Bob was here to see this expression of public history come to fruition. With that, thank you very much, and again, I really appreciate being here.
Thank you, Dr. Kenedy. Really appreciate that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more speaker. As you can see, I now have the spotlight on my head. So we've done an ant check. Now we're doing a sun check. We've got one last speaker. It's only going to be a couple minutes, but if you feel you need to get up and move out of the sun, please do. But with that said, I'd just like to say, working up in Austin, we've got a lot of resources at the Texas Historical Commission to help us research topics, work on historical markers, put together brochures, and do all sorts of preservation projects across the state. But the best resource that we have out in the communities around Texas is in each county. It's the County Historical Commission. And thanks to Truett Hunt, we've been able to come here and do research, present locally. He talked with local landowners. We have the historical marker in the ground. The members of his commission are here with us today, and they all deserve a great round of applause. So if you would, help me join with one more round of applause for Pastor. With that said, I'd like to invite up to the podium, I'll move one to the left for the shade, our last speaker of the day, Truett Hunt, the chair of the Karnes County Historical Commission. He's going to give us some closing remarks. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I just want to thank a few people. Thank William for getting this ball rolling and for all the work and research he's done. Senator Zaffarini, thank you for coming here today. Not many people know it, but Senator Zaffarini has worked very hard behind the scenes for historical preservation. And I want to especially thank the Lajeunesse family, for allowing us to put the marker here. There's a couple of people like Richard Perdoza involved in setting it up. Richard's not here today. And thank Tommy for coming to speak. Thank Judge Butler for being here. It's just great to have everybody here for this. Deanne Franklin, Connor, you grew up here?
I did, in this very house.
You're probably not old enough to remember when your dad was still refurbishing it, are you?
I was born after they built it. So they built it like in 52, and I was born in 50.
I can barely remember it myself.
So I do remember moving to this house, yes.
But you need to meet the Lajeunesses and
I
talk
do.
to
I
them
do not
about
know
the
them. I
house.
will meet them before I leave. Is that you? I will meet you before I leave.
At any rate, once again, thank you all for being
Hi.
here. And that's about
My
all we
parents
need
would
to
be
do here
thrilled to
except
death.
unveil this marker.
My mom and dad would be thrilled.
Good.
And I do want to say, I know you know all the history about this place, but here the lodge is built on one of the slabs from the concentration camp. I don't know if you know that. And the fountain in the backyard they used as a water fountain when it was here.
Still there.
I know, it was here when I left, so yes.
Yes, thank you, Lee, for letting us have the marker in your yard. Thank you.
And with that, let's everybody get into the shade and get a glass of water or iced tea or something. Thank you.
Let's unveil it real quick, though. If I could have Senator Zaffarini, Dr. Kenedy, and of course Chair Hunt come over here to the marker. The marker is facing out towards the street. So everyone will please get up and just walk around to the side of the corner here. We'll have them unveil it.
Other side.
Exactly right there. Looks good. And thank you.
How awesome. Thank you guys for coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Take your photos, read the marker, and of course, please enjoy the great refreshments made possible by the Karnes County Historical Commission and the other local folks who helped set up these tables today. And if you want a brochure on the subject of support, 5 p.m. protection, they got it right here. Stop by my hand.
There's sweet tea and cookies at the table, and there's water in the cooler.
I always say.
Oh, what is that?